Welcome to our study of Omniscient Jigme Lingpa's Yönten Rinpoche Treasury of Precious Qualities. And as always, kindly generate the intention to engage with this with the attitude of bodhicitta, the wish to apply this on the path in order to ultimately establish all sentient beings at the level of perfect liberation and omniscience. So we'll begin with invoking the wisdom body of Omniscient Jigme Lingpa, the source of love and compassion for all beings, who knows all that is knowable, emanation of Longchenpa, heir to a treasury of mind thermas, sky-like yogin of the vast expanse of luminosity. In Jigme Lingpa, at your feet we pray. So we're presently studying the chapter on refuge, and we've defined the three jewels, and now we're going to be looking at what it means to take refuge. So here in the root text, it reads, our path and our protection is the sacred Dharma, the Dharma that from Buddha has arisen. The Sangha is composed of those who dwell within the trainings or assist us in achieving them. Wherefore this triple gem is our object of refuge. So again, this is very much where we're entering into the application. So we've defined what exactly the three jewels are, and now the way that we take refuge is first of all understood in terms of protection, and that's rather essential in terms of us engaging with the path, is identifying the toxic, the painful nature of samsara and our delusion. And as such, what we're really taking refuge, what taking refuge implies, that we are seeking protection from this condition of pain. So that's where we very much have this sense of being a refugee, someone who is escaping. And the enemy here is not external, it's our own delusion that conjures up, creates, constructs all these various scenarios of pain, which is what we call samsara. And we might actually, we have actually a pretty cushy situation, most of us, let's face it. But at the same time, the condition of duality, the sensitive core of this is me, I. And even within our very cushy situation, it's interesting how many things bother us. And if we could just imagine that when this is taken to the nth degree, how much pain there is. So that's why we have no compunctions in the Buddhist teaching about describing the sufferings of samsara, but we're not talking about something out there, but we can identify it in terms of the cause and the afflictions, the afflictive emotions, the kleshas that are implicit within our own experience of I. So the refuge is then the Buddha. And in terms of us now engaging in the path, we're defining this in terms of our journey, which is the Dharma. But we understand that this is where this has arisen from the Buddha, and our journey now consists of the Dharma. That's where we're essentially manifesting enlightenment on the basis of what the Buddha has taught, and also that implies that we see the Buddha as a teacher. But the moment that we're beginning to practice the Dharma, we are doing what any teacher would want us to, which is gaining autonomy. So we're not, by practicing the path, we're obviously following the Buddha, but we're not thinking of the path in terms of some eternal condition of being followers. The Buddha, just like a teacher, doesn't want the students to stay in this class year after year. That basically means they're flunking. So the Buddha would like us to apply the teaching and gain awakening. So that's how we should understand the Dharma, as the path the Buddha shows us, and where we don't just look at the finger, but we look at what the finger is pointing to. The Sangha is composed of those who dwell within the trainings, these being then discipline, meditation, and prajna, and we take refuge in them as those who have the capacity, and also those who show us how we should do this. So this is what we mean then with the triple gem as our object of refuge. Now Kangyur Rinpoche then explains to us, the sacred Dharma is the path leading beyond suffering. It is the protection from the two extremes, samsara on the one hand and the peace of nirvana on the other. And this is important, and we often see this to be free from the extremes of sishi. One is the samsara, sipa, or the cycle of suffering, and shiva, peace. But if as long as we're still wanting to get out of samsara and we're wanting to have peace, that's still based on the delusion. That's still based on the notion of self. So we want to extract ourselves from delusion altogether. So the condition of nirvana is still a condition of delusion. The seed of suffering is still there. So we want to be awakened, not just go into a condition of peace. Mind you, we'll see there are different individuals who have different ambitions in terms of the practice of the path. So it says that, but this we very often see, that we aspire, because we might think, oh, but aren't we heading towards nirvana? And we can sometimes use the term nirvana for enlightenment, but in general here we are certainly talking about how these are just two extremes. Kangyur Rinpoche says, the Dharma has come to us from the Buddha, our teacher, and those who have embraced the three trainings, discipline, meditation, and prajna, and who assist us in our own efforts to accomplish them. And those who have embraced the three trainings and who assist us in our own efforts to accomplish them are the Sangha. These three, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, are the three jewels, the refuge of those who strive for liberation. It is said in the 70 stanzas of refuge, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha are the protection for those who yearn for liberation. So we have two ways of taking refuge. One is understanding that we are humbly recognizing that we are confused individuals. The other is understanding that while we are confused individuals, we also have a seed or even an innate disposition that is not confused. So that's where, on one hand, we have an understanding of the ordinary mind and its confused delusional constructions. And on the other hand, the fact that we possess Buddha nature. There is part of us that is not conditioned by confusion. So that we're talking about these two kinds of refuge. The root text reads, of the vows of refuge, causal and resultant, the first is aspiration for attainment at some later time. Resultant refuge is the mind itself, already now accomplished. This refuge is the special feature of the Vajrayana. The object of the causal refuge is the triple gem, while in the Mantrayana is embodied in the Lama, which in the Vajrayana is embodied in the Lama. So we have these two, and when we're talking about the causal and resultant, we're talking about what we refer to as the general Buddhist path, and this we often refer to as the sutra path. And this stands in juxtaposition to the mantra path, the Vajrayana. Now, we very often would say the Vajrayana is a section of the Mahayana. We would say Mahayana is what takes us to perfect awakening. There's no delusion there. But the Vajrayana is that which within the Mahayana takes the angle of integrating this already pure mind as the path. And as such, then the refuge in the Vajrayana is not about something that will come later. And this is where we generally would refer to the sutra path as taking 3 countless eons, because it operates with the ordinary confused mind. Whereas the Vajrayana, it takes wisdom. It takes Buddha nature as its path. And that's where it's said that the Vajrayana can accomplish awakening in a very short time. So we talk about Buddha, Dharma, Sangha in the causal vehicle, and particularly then in the Mantrayana, the one that really enables us to be introduced to this wisdom nature, which is the teacher, is then the refuge. Although we're going to see there's ways in which we then integrate this in various ways. So according to Jigme Lingpa's root text, Kangyur Rinpoche writes, within the Mahayana, the Sutrayana refuge is the causal refuge, while the Vajrayana refuge is the resultant refuge. The vows of both of them should be taken with utter sincerity and not as mere lip service. The refuge of the expository vehicle of causality is the vow to practice with a view to accomplishing the three jewels in the future, after 3 measureless kalpas or more. You know, sometimes we have these terms for the causal vehicle, the expository vehicle. The Tibetan would be tseni tekpa, and that means the vehicle that essentially operates with rationality. It operates with logical thinking. And that's very helpful. And logical thinking enables us to approach this in a rational way. This gives tremendous faith. Whereas the Vajrayana, it goes beyond ordinary concepts. It goes beyond ordinary mind. And so very often we would hear Vajrayana teachers talking about the limitations of the rational mind. But of course, as long as we're stuck within the causality and you could say a reality that is very much fueled by navigation through rationality, the sutra path is not something we should poo-poo in any way. It is extremely important, and particularly is what sets the condition for entering into the Vajrayana. But it is still operating with, you could say, the conventional, the confused mind. The ultimate focus of interest is the state of Buddhahood. Let's just see what they say. Okay, this is from Yönten Gyatso. And again, Khenpo Yönten Gyatso was a very great Khenpo who was a student of Paltro Rinpoche and Jamgon Mipam Rinpoche. And we have an extraordinary larger commentary on the Treasury of Precious Qualities from Yönten Gyatso. Anyway, here then the footnotes quoting him says, the Dharma of transmission has to be abandoned in the same way as a boat is left behind when the far shore is reached. All the compounded aspects of the truth of the path are changing and ultimately false, while the cessation as described in the Shravakayana is a state of extinction. Finally, the 3 types of Sangha still have certain obscurations to discard and are thus not immune from fears. Thus, the sole and ultimate refuge is Buddhahood. So we're talking about how Dharma as such and the Sangha also are not the ultimate refuge, but the Buddha is. Oh, yeah. So that is the ultimate focus that we're attending to. And the ultimate focus is the state of Buddhahood. Kangyur Rinpoche writes, for it is here alone that all the qualities of the 3 jewels are complete. The resultant refuge, now we're talking Vajrayana, which is the special refuge of the Vajrayana deriving from the view peculiar to that vehicle, is the vow to actualize the nature of one's own mind, understood to be the 3 jewels themselves. So we talk about how there's fear drives taking refuge, right? And I think we talked about this earlier, where the Shravaka approach is fear of the pains of samsara. The Bodhisattva approach is fear of nirvana, not wishing to abandon sentient beings. And the Vajrayana fear is fear of delusion. That's the fear. There's not any sense that there's something lacking, but there is a fear that we, instead of seeing and realizing the nature of one's own mind, that one would be stuck in delusion, circling in delusion. So as such then, the Vajrayana refuge is this vow to actualize the nature of one's own mind, understood to be the 3 jewels themselves. So that's why there's nothing lacking within the nature of mind. We would say all the qualities are there. Now, so this is to be actualized now in this very moment, and not as something to be accomplished in some point in the future. The result, Buddhahood, is sought for in one's own mind and nowhere else. So that's the refuge, that's the starting point of the Vajrayana, that which we are accomplishing is already spontaneously present. Kangyur Rinpoche writes, generally speaking, however, according to the Mahayana expository vehicle of causality, the object of refuge is the three jewels. The Buddha endowed with the four kayas and the five wisdoms, the sacred Dharma, the four kayas being the Dhammakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, and Svabhavikakaya, and the five wisdoms as well. The the mirror-like, the wisdom of Dhammadhatu, the mirror-like wisdom, the quality wisdom, the wisdom of discernment, and the wisdom of enlightened activity. So these are the qualities the Buddha is endowed with. And then the sacred Dharma of, and we have two kinds, remember, we have the Dharma, the theory, the whole transmission, all the various teachings that come down from the Buddha, and then realization, an unbroken heritage or lineage of individuals that attain freedom, who are not just sort of professors or lecturers, intellectuals who will expound the teaching, but persons who actually have eliminated confusion and brought about complete manifestation of the qualities of awakening. So that's where the Dharma reaches us. We're very lucky. We live in a time where we're hearing the Dharma, not just from persons who have a theoretical appreciation, but living masters. So that's how we receive the Dharma. And this then makes it very different for us to engage in the path. We can look at persons and see how they actually walk the talk. And then the third jewel, and the noble Sangha dwelling on the grounds of accomplishment. These are then what we call the higher Sangha. We also have the motley crew of individuals who we might not perceive as having all these qualities. They might not appear to be dwelling on the grounds of accomplishment, but we still take refuge in it, in this Sangha. And this is significant because as such, we are not viewing, we don't have that theistic view that the refuge is something out there. The refuge is in our own, the removability of our own confusion and those that are practicing with that inspiration. And again, I always quoting Chögyam Trungpa, who defined Sangha as one individual relinquishing their territory and in doing so inspires others. This is very appropriate for any stage of the path and when we're engaging with the Sangha. To take refuge in them as teacher, the Buddha, path, the Dharma, and companions, the Sangha, is the causal refuge, whereas the resultant refuge is the aspiration to actualize the three jewels in one's mind in the future. Okay, according to the vehicle of the secret mantra, however, so this is still within the Mahayana, where whereas we define the resultant refuge. Okay, so this is within the Mahayana. We define the resultant refuge as, we know that we have Buddha nature, but we see it as a potential, as a seed. It's still in its embryonic stage. So it will come about if we water it and so forth, but it's not there yet. In the secret mantra, according to the vehicle of the secret mantra, however, the nature of the three jewels, and let's just see what the commentary says, in addition to the three jewels as identified previously, the main deity of the mandala is considered as Buddha. This we could see on one hand as the guru, but also as our main commitment, our main discipline on the path to our main commitment to truth as enlightenment, and that also we see as the deity. Then we say the 4 or 6 classes of Tantra together with the generation and perfection stage practices are the Dharma. I think up here, the way that it's talked about, even though I think it's the Tibetan would presumably be Tsoyla or something like that, but it is, I think this is referred to as what we call the crown Buddha or the Lord of the Mandala, meaning the Guru. Then we have the various practices of the Tantras, that's the Dharma. And while the Dakinis, Dakas, and protectors living in the 24 sacred places, 32 lands, and 8 charnel grounds are the Sangha. So this is the Vajrayana 3 jewels. And if you're practicing the Longchen Nyingtik Ngondro, you will have this where it says the actuality of the 3 jewels are the sugatas of the 3 roots. And these are then the 3 roots that we're referring to here. So then it says the resultant vehicle, the resultant refuge, which is the special refuge of the Vajrayana, deriving, however, the nature of the 3 jewels is embodied in the Lama, the spiritual master. And again, all of this, whether it's deity or the Dakinians, protectors, and so on, or it's the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, all that is seen as being embodied in one's teacher. One's root teacher is the embodiment of all the Buddhas. The teacher's body, speech, and mind are the Sangha, the body, the Dharma, the speech, and the mind, the Buddha, respectively. With this understanding, to take refuge in him or her is a non-dual manner. That is, without seeing a difference between the one who is seeking protection and the one who is giving protection. That is the causal vehicle. So that's where we engage with the Guru, the one who guides us on the path, bestows empowerments and pith instructions and so on, is seen as somebody who's giving us the protection, and we are seeking it. But that's within the Vajrayana, you could say, the causal vehicle. However, finally, to understand that one's own mind, in that very instant, the 3 jewels, is to take the resultant refuge. And that's different from the Mahayana way of understanding the resultant refuge, which is, yes, we have Buddha nature, we will actualize it one day. In the Vajrayana, that refuge is recognizing the abiding innate purity of one's present, one's own mind. So this involves, Kangyur Rinpoche writes, this involves the recognition of one's mind as the wisdom of luminosity. This is the recognition of the mind that's not confused, not wandering in samsara. It involves the recognition that the mind is without defect from the very beginning, and that is endowed from the first with every perfect quality. There is nothing to purify, and there is nothing new to gain. The mind itself is Buddha. This resultant refuge involves, too, the recognition of the mind's stainless ultimate nature, primordially unchanging, as Dharma, and of its inalienable qualities as Sangha. Okay, I think there's a question here. So, do our position now as a duality of confusion and not confusion, what the Dharma is wanting to be aware of? Well, right now we have to humbly acknowledge that we're confused, but that confusion is removable. We have an illness, but it's a curable illness. So that's where we have, you could say, the potential for health already presently as we're sick. Right now we have a confused mind, and at the same time we possess Buddha nature. So we take refuge with the understanding that through taking refuge, we will heal this confusion and awaken this innate awakened state or Buddha nature. Now, the different motives for taking refuge. So Jigme Lingpa writes, 3 motivations, narrow, great, and unsurpassed, define 3 kinds of beings. Those of little scope are frightened of the lower realms. They can progress as far as higher realms. Now, this we've seen again. This is generally what we refer to as the scope of the 3 kinds of individuals. And those who would like to just have a higher rebirth, they'd like to be born in a comfortable place. They'd like to go to heaven. They would like to be all right. But they're not that primitive that they think that, when you're dead and there's no consequence. There's an understanding that mind is what creates our reality, and that's not prone to just, disappearing just because the physical conditions or the physical embodiment dissolves. So there is very much all across the board in what we traditionally refer to as religions, this sort of idea that we could go somewhere very comfortable. Intrinsic to the Buddhist path, then there's the understanding that we have essentially a condition of delusion, and that as long as we're not free of delusion, we're going to be, no matter, even if we're reborn in a higher comfortable condition, that won't last. And that's where putting an end to samsara is then the second kind. And that's actually what Jigme Lingpa refers to as, he's saying it is great. That's a great motivation. But the unsurpassed is, of course, there where we're not limited just to think of ourselves, but being very aware of the suffering universally in the case of others. So here Kangyur Rinpoche comments, there are three possible attitudes of mind in those who take refuge. First, there are those who wish to accomplish a temporary, ephemeral happiness. Then there are those who wish to accomplish permanent happiness. Finally, there are those who have the unsurpassable attitude of wishing to accomplish the happiness of others. So of course the last is then what defines the Mahayana. The first is what we refer to as the Hinayana or Shravakayana, and the second is the second is the Shravaka, and then the third is the Bodhisattvayana. Okay, let's just see. Sorry, yeah, 14 and 15. Those of middle scope seek freedom, fearful of samsara. They take refuge for their own life's duration, and ultimately till they gain the goal pursued by both the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas. Now, when we talk about Shravakayana, it actually refers to, and when we say Hinayana, it refers to both the Shravakas and the Pratyeka Buddhas. Now, Shravaka are students of the Buddha who have heard the Buddha's teaching. They're mainly concerned about their own liberation. But what's interesting about the Shravaka, in Tibetan, the word is tudak. And when we say Shravaka, the Shra, and the root there is associated with Shruti, to hear, and Waka, speech, to proclaim, tudak, those who hear and proclaim. We actually say many of the Mahayana teachings were communicated by students who didn't practice the Mahayana teachings themselves, but they heard them, and while they were mainly concerned about their own liberation, they passed on the Mahayana teachings. So this is the etymology of the term Shravaka. But what we mean with the Shravaka is not only that they are limited in their motivation to free beings, but there's also a cognitive dimension in terms of their understanding. They still believe that there is some solidity, both in terms of consciousness as well as matter. And it's within there that we find, you could say, the view that corresponds to what we in the standard model of physics and what we used to kind of define as the view of physics. There is a sort of the atom model, that there's our reality is composed of just small particles. And also in terms of consciousness, that there actually is a consciousness that has some reality. And this, of course, is fine in terms of understanding relative truth, but there's not the notion that it is only a relative projection. For these beings, it is understood as being the ultimate reality. Pratyeka Buddhas, they're a little bit more sophisticated, and they also understand how matter actually is just a projection, the physical world, but they still believe that there is some self, some subtle consciousness. So these are then what we constitute or refer to as the Hinayana. So both in terms of their motivation and also in terms of their understanding of reality, there's some limitations there. So let me just get the other one as well. Great beings fear the blissful peace that overlooks the good of others, that they might free them from samsara in the state of great relief. Until enlightenment is gained, they take resultant refuge in the mind itself, wherein there are no false phenomena, either to be spurned or gained. And this is then the Bodhisattvas, who are great beings. And they first of all, they have a great heart. They are conscious of the suffering of others, and they also have fearless minds in terms of investigating reality. So they go all the way into investigating reality fully, a thorough analysis where they understand that there's nothing that has any ultimate abiding intrinsic truth. And that's where their scope of understanding, the nature of reality is then unconfused. And that's where there's no delusion taking place. So that's where they understand ultimately that this nature of emptiness, they understand that fully, and they aspire to fully realize it. So that's where their resultant vehicle is within the unconfused mind. But again, this is where it's let me just see. Let me see about that. Hold on. Okay, let's see what the commentary says. Okay. Anyway, so as to the first type, we may refer to them as beings of lesser scope. Such people are afraid of the lower realms and take refuge in the three jewels in order to gain the happiness of the higher realms of gods and humans. So again, this is the middling scope, right, of these two. Rather, of the three, this is the middling scope. So this is the first type that's described in verse 14. So they just wish to gain. Let me just see here. Gosh, I'm sorry. It might just be that they're just aspiring to the higher realms. That's right, and they take refuge. Okay, until they do so. Until they. That's right. Okay, so this is referring to the Buddhists that take refuge, but they really just, even though they're Buddhist, they really just want the happiness of samsara. They want the higher realms such as gods and humans. So they take refuge until they achieve that. The beings of middle scope, the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, fear the suffering of existence as such and take refuge in the three jewels with a view to their own liberation. In the intermediate term, they take refuge for the rest of their lives, while, ultimately speaking, they take refuge until they attain the fruit of the Hinayana path, which is arhatship. Finally, beings of great scope, the practitioners of the Mahayana, repudiate the attitude of wishing for their own happiness alone and neglecting the plight of others. For them, it seems repugnant to them. And that's why we actually say they fear nirvana, to actually just be caught up in one's own liberation, ignoring others. There, for them, that's the most terrible, frightful thing that could ever happen. Again, I'm always giving the example, if you're on a ship that's sinking, you're not going to enjoy sitting there on your own, surviving if everybody else is drowning. So the bodhisattvas, they take refuge until they attain great enlightenment in order to liberate every being in samsara and place them in the condition of great freedom or Buddhahood. In fact, those who have internalized the profound sense of the sutras of definitive meaning, together with the tantras, realize that there are no truly existent samsaric defects or qualities of nirvana to be eliminated or attained. Okay? Now, so that's where those who understand, when we talk about the sutras of definitive meaning, this is, for example, the sutras such as the Samdhya Niyamocana sutras, the Prajnaparamita, and so on, that actually talk about the nature of emptiness, the nature of luminosity, and also the tantras. So they realize that such a thing, and samsara is delusion. There is no such a thing. Just like the dream last night, it appeared, yet it doesn't really possess any ultimate, enduring, permanent, unchanging reality. So we would say there's no truly existent samsaric defects. That's what these bodhisattvas, they see. Or that there's qualities of nirvana to be eliminated or attained. So there's nothing that needs to be eliminated, nothing that needs to be attained. From the very outset, the fundamental state of mind is free from compounded phenomena, deceptive and relative, which nevertheless arise in the sequential order of cause and effect due to the mechanism of acceptance and rejections. To see the face of the Sugatagarbha, the ultimate reality, and to rest in it is to take unsurpassable refuge in its resultant aspect. So as you heard before, I was a little bit confused about how this applies, but I would say this last category, the great practitioners, here we're referring both to those who are taking the sutra path of the Mahayana, the gradual path of the Mahayana, which has a complete scope that grasps the ultimate reality, and also the mantra path of the Mahayana, that recognizing perfection and awakening as being intrinsic to the nature of the mind, not something to be attained in the future, but already present immediately right now. So anyway, so in this way we have what we refer to as ordinary individuals with a limited scope, the great beings of those who wish to free themselves from samsara, and the unsurpassed beings who wish to basically wish to establish all sentient beings in perfect liberation. So how to take refuge? Okay, so Jigme Lingpa says, the compassion of the Buddhas is at all times opportune for those who wander on the path. All discourse on the qualities of just a single of a Buddha's pause can never have an end. One would be like a bird that fails to reach the limits of the sky and comes to earth again. So what we're saying here is that we at all times recognize the immensity of the Buddha's wisdom and compassion, and the presence, the immediacy of the Buddha for all those who wander, who are practicing the path. Now, all the qualities of Buddhas are impossible, or rather any kind of description just of any of the Buddha's qualities would be endless, and to try to describe we would fail. So that's where we give the image of a bird that might think, oh, well, let me go to the end of the sky. And the poor thing, it'll just end up falling to the ground. So Kangyur Rinpoche comments, beings constantly wander upon the 5 pathways. So sorry, this is where the compassion for the Buddha is not just for those on the path, but also in samsara. So it says these 5 pathways are mentioned. Okay, let's just see if I can get it to work. Let's go to the footnotes. Come on. Okay. Yes. So these 5 pathways are mentioned in the Denyi Shingta, Jigme Lingpa's auto-commentary to the Treasury of Precious Qualities. Yeah, so we have various commentaries. We also have Jigme Lingpa's own. That's the Denyi Shingta, the vehicle of the 2 truths. So it says here, but let's just see here. This is Yönten Gyatso, who's basically, this is Yönten Gyatso speaking. So he says, the 5 pathways are mentioned in the Jigme Lingpa's auto commentary, but I have not found them discussed anywhere else. According to the explanations I received from my own teachers, the path of dream refers to the period after deep sleep when, in a state of deluded non-conceptual consciousness, various perceptions of places, mental states, and other beings follow each other in quick succession. That's one. The path of habitual tendencies refers to the instinctual traces left behind by actions that have already yielded their fully ripened effect. They linger behind, manifesting as the recollection of places, mental states, and beings in any of the 6 realms, high or low, where one has taken birth. So that was 2. The path of karma refers to the propelling positive, negative, or unwavering action performed in the corporeal form one has assumed. That was 3, right? 4, the path of uncertain feelings refers to various types of suffering in the bardo of becoming due to 6 uncertainties. The path was 4, and then 5th, the path of uncertain effects of causes means that though positive and negative actions are never wasted and always ripen into their respective results due to the infallibility of dependent arising, nevertheless, some variety may appear in their ripened effect, for the simple reason that they are compounded phenomena. For example, if an evildoer makes a proper confession or implements some other strong antidote, the full effect of that action committed will be attenuated. Conversely, a positive action, i.e., one that is conditioned by the impure view of inherent existence, may be overwhelmed by anger, with the result that its effect will not ripen. So that's where we talk about uncertain effects. This is important, because we should always understand karma as not being this one-shot deal that one action leads to one thing, but it's complex depending on many different conditions. So anyway, we're talking quite simply, when we say the 5 pathways, as we can see here, is that we're talking about these conditions of samsara, basically. So here then, the commentary of Kangyur Rinpoche reads: the path of dreams, the path of habitual tendencies, the path of karma, the path of uncertain feelings, and the path of the uncertain effects of causes. So that's sentient beings. That's where they're wandering. So many different ways of defining this, but this is how Jigme Lingpa chooses to define the condition of samsara. For them, the Buddha's compassion is always timely and is beyond attachment or impediment. In the Kammashataka Sutra, it is said, the tides of serpent-crowded seas may fluctuate and change, yet for his children, those whom he might train, the Buddha's acts are always timely. So when we're talking about the tides, this is an interesting term, serpent-crowded seas, well, we generally would say that the realm of water, both the seas and also the subterranean ground water, is the domain of the Nagas. So that's where water always needs to be treated so carefully. Like, you don't want to pee in a swimming pool, but you also don't want to pee in the ocean. And there's so much culture around treating water with respect within Asian cultures, certainly within Buddhist cultures, and particularly within Indian. I know from having lived in India and Nepal and also in Tibet, the whole relationship to water, springs, rivers, and so forth is very much sort of a domain of what has to be treated purely. And this is entirely an aside, because here what we're actually talking about is just the fact that the oceans, they come and go. However, the Buddha's compassion never yields from any of those that are on the path, and they're always appropriate. So, Kangyur Rinpoche comments, so immense are the qualities of the Tathagata that even the powerful bodhisattvas dwelling on the 10th ground, whose vast treasury of wisdom has opened wide, are unable to describe the tiniest pore of his body. Were they to attempt such a feat, they would be like birds trying to fly to the edges of the sky. At length, they fall to earth. Says here then, 17. Ishvara. So Ishvara is how we would understand, you could say, the gods. The gods, sometimes also Ishvara is referred to in Buddhist literature as the belief that there is some God that creates everything. But it's also sometimes referred to simply as, you could say, some of the more powerful gods. Ishvara, Wangchuk. The Chakravartins. So these are sort of the greatest samsaric beings. And the rest, with hidden stores of faults. So they might have very high rebirth, right? But they still have hidden stores of faults. They're within their condition, being samsaric beings, they still have the consciousness, where presently this consciousness manifests in a particular way, but it's conditioned. And eventually the negative actions that they would have within their accumulation of countless lifetimes doing all sorts of actions, they will manifest. Anyway, let me just read it without interrupting with my own commentary. Ishvara, the Chakravartins, and the rest, with hidden stores of faults, the evil actions that they amassed, turn constantly upon samsara's wheel, perceiving them to be deceptive refuges, we should, with fear and faith and with compassion and with the attitude of greatest scope, concern for others' good, be mindful of the triple gem and thus take refuge. So we essentially want to take refuge in an undeceptive guide. So that's where we don't take refuge in these beings. They might provide some temporary benefit, but they're not ultimate refuges. Samsara is like a wheel of a watermill. From the peak of existence down to the hell of torment unsurpassed, beings revolve constantly through the sequences of the 12 interdependent links. All who have committed evil actions through wrong views and strong emotions, be they universal sovereigns or gods like Brahma and Indra, or the rich and powerful of this world, all must wander in samsara. Failing to realize the ultimate truth, they rush headlong into the fearful abyss. It is true that on a temporary basis, such beings may help or harm us, but people who possess the threefold motivation, okay, fear of samsara, faith in the three jewels, and compassion for those who are ignorant of where to turn, know perfectly well that they are, meaning the gods and powerful beings, that they are deceptive protectors, both now and in the long run. Such disciples, those who take refuge, should, like the great bodhisattvas, cast behind them all self-centeredness. So that's where we need to have a mind that's interested in liberation, not just the sort of short-term relief. They should cultivate the enlightened mind for others' sake and be mindful of the qualities of the three jewels, wishing from the depth of their hearts to accomplish such qualities in themselves. They should take refuge reciting the 7-branch prayer in the presence of the field of merit. So the 7-branch prayer is a way in which we would take refuge, also develop bodhicitta, as well as also the aspects of offering confession, rejoicing, requesting to turn the wheel, requesting not to pass into nirvana, and dedication. So in this way, we should be clear that when we take refuge, we don't take refuge in what actually doesn't constitute a worthy refuge, a non-deceptive refuge. Okay, I'm going to leave it at here today, and then we'll begin next time the benefits of taking refuge. Any questions? Feel free. Okay. Okay. No questions. Thank you. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, look, we'll then end today, and thank you again for engaging in this study. I think everyone is aware of how important actually these texts are, and of course, we're continually dabbling in, you could say, a vocabulary and a perspective that extends far beyond what we normally encounter. And so, what could you say? I feel just grateful that everyone appreciates really the value of this. And sometimes it talks about things where we might feel temporarily a bit baffled by just the information, but it's things that definitely are food for thought. And for example, just the last point here, it's really a very important point. Is when we're attending to liberating ourselves from delusion, it's not going to help to just have a temporary relief, just like we want to get to the bottom of an illness. It doesn't help that we just eliminate the symptoms. So yes, it is a gift. We are fortunate. Okay, I'll conclude with dedication. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Thank you.